Well, good evening. Welcome to this PJNET.TV episode. I'm Coach Prasick, and we have, for the 374th time, a guest that has never been on the program before. And we are going to cover a lot of ground. You are going to be sitting on the edge of your seats as we introduce our guest all the way from the great Republic of Texas. Yes, I did say Republic of Texas, and his name is Rocky Malloy. Now, Rocky, in the short time that I have spoken to him, is an interesting character, to say the very least. Rocky, before we get into current things, thanks for making yourself available, but tell us about, you are just not too recently, you were in a foreign country.
Yes, my wife and I have lived in several countries overseas. We met during the Sandinista War, and most recently we were living in Panama. We moved to the United States, North Houston area, the Woodlands, in 2021, sorry.
And what were you doing in the, is that classified?
No, it's not everything's classified. Primarily, we were running our international publishing and chaplaincy programs.
When you say international, that opens up a vista, a different scene, because when you talk about chaplaincy, we think about hospitals, we think about the military, we think about prisons. But is that the case around the world?
Well, chaplains look different overseas than they do in the United States. The separation clause has kind of skewed ministry in secular environments. But overseas, their chaplains are very active, and they're probably more ministry focused than in the United States. We find them very effective. And in my experience, chaplains have been very effective in public and private and charter schools.
When you say very effective, is that a feeling that you have based on, or do you have statistics to back that up?
Well, we've got empirical data and anecdotal data. It's hard because there's not a lot of baseline data in these other countries, but some interesting data is that teen pregnancies, which is pretty easy to track, have been reduced by up to 80%. So we're in 24,000 schools. So if you add it up, that's over 21 million people. So in a slice that wide, to reduce teen pregnancies by that percentage, you're talking about hundreds or thousands of children that have been otherwise born in very undesirable conditions.
Well, and the effects of that are far-reaching, because these mothers in their teens, assuming that it goes to full-term birth, have placed themselves at a serious social and economic disadvantage.
Yeah, you know what? These countries were losing a huge brain trust because these girls were forced to drop out of school. So there was a significant loss of all the intelligence embodied in a woman, and it was made their lives difficult. 90% of the children born to a teen mother in Latin America is raised in poverty. And it has a lot of brain development issues and personal development. I mean, it's a lot of tragedy involved. And so for young women to make a quality decision to not participate in activity that would create pregnancy was huge.
Well, and again, the tentacles reach everywhere. When a teen mother tries to enter the workforce for legitimate gainful employment, first, legitimate employment's difficult to get. Gainful employment is almost impossible to get. So they turn to other, well, let's just call them revenue streams.
Yeah, there's a lot of nefarious activity in Latin America, but you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of child victimization. So the mother, a lot of times, is resorted to selling her child. And so um, I don't want to, well, it's very uncomfortable to talk about it, but these mass migrations of people up to our southern border, a lot of these children are the results of unwanted pregnancies, and those children are unaccompanied minors. And the
Mhm.
cartel uses them to bring people over, and they disappear, and there's horrific things happen to these little children.
And you won't hear that in the testimony in Washington D.C. Yeah, or you'll hear it, but it's marginalized, and that's too bad. Um, let's talk about you've introduced the idea of chaplaincy internationally. It's not uncommon, or I presume. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is. It's not forbidden. Put it that way, for chaplains to be operating in the school system.
Every industrialized nation I've looked at has school chaplains. Australia, and Australia, you can't even own a gun anymore. They're still in COVID lockdown, and they have a national school chaplain program. The UK, Holland, Germany, they all have chaplains in schools because the same reason we have chaplains with first responders and in hospitals, teachers and kids have stress. And there's nobody that can relieve stress like a chaplain.
Mm-hmm.
When let's make it real simple. So a regular somebody has depression, and a regular counselor, a qualified person, can bring them to understand that they have guilt, and that guilt has created this depression. But that's it. The chaplain can take them back to why they feel guilt and then pray for forgiveness for either somebody else or for themselves or whoever, and alleviate the guilt. I mean, that's why Jesus came. So chaplains can do something the best counselors in the world can't
You mentioned earlier the separation clause. And I don't know if you're prepared for this question. I'm not trying to throw you off, but when I uh, was heard about the idea that maybe chaplains belong in schools, that was the first thing that was brought up, the separation clause. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, prisons have chaplains. The military has chaplains. Our in those two institutions, the military is not a train wreck. Our education system is.
You know what, Coach? That's the first thing when we talk about this. That was kind of the knee jerk thing. We're like, well, you couldn't do that because separation clause. And we go, well, hang on. Let's show you some facts, and that the Supreme Court and district courts have consistently upheld chaplains. Chaplains existed before the U.S. Constitution, Articles of Confederation, and its military law supersedes civilian law. So chaplains have been a part of our American society before we were an official society. And decisions, and there's really not that many decisions because it's status quo. So we got a pretty hard argument about chaplains in the United States. And guess what? The legality of it was not one of them because they knew it was a loser. The question then became, you mean we could have always done this? And we go, yeah. It was never not permissible. We just believed that we couldn't do it, so nobody did it. I shouldn't say nobody. There's 2010 chaplains on school payrolls according to the U.S. labor statistics. I don't know where they're all at. I know where some of them are. So there's over 2,000 chaplains serving in K-12 schools right now.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a statistic earlier of how many chaplains that your organization was. I guess they had recruited, trained, or had some involvement. But how many of those are in the U.S.? If you don't even know where 2,100 of them are that presumably exist by the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
We have 23,709 schools with chaplains that we've trained in 23 countries. Now, one of those countries is the United States, but it's exclusively in Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico is
Ah,
a U.S. constitutional protectorate.
protectorate.
Same laws, same everything. We've got 81 schools there with our chaplains. So when people say, "Do you have anything in America?" I go, "Well, we're in Costa Rica,
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Sorry, Puerto
Yeah.
Rico.
Okay. Yeah, you've been in Latin America too long, Rocky.
Yeah, yeah.
I used to love on a cruise going to Puerto Rico because you could go to, remember those payphone thingies?
The
Well,
what?
you could, the payphones, remember them?
Oh yeah, Facebook. Yeah.
That's not an international call back to home in the United States. And you could send a postcard for first class postage. That was what I loved about Puerto Rico. That and the, well, many other things we won't go into here. Um, 24,000. You said you had, quote, trained. Now, you might be a busy man, but I can't see how you individually train 24,000 chaplains. Tell me about your organization, which I'll put your website on the screen. It's a long one, the National School Chaplain Association.org, but obviously you have some manpower above and beyond yourself.
You know what, Coach? When I used to pastor, and we had about 1,000 members in our church, and I'm thinking, you know what? Even though I love church, I'm thinking this isn't really a great model. We had planted hundreds of churches, we had Bible schools, and we were just making a small dent in society. So I'm thinking, man, all these kids, and really my heart was for children after what I experienced in the Nicaraguan war. So we were thinking, how could we help them? And spiritual care for children turned out to be a winner. So we just started providing spiritual care for children in local schools, and it grew and grew. At one point, I had over 100,000 people being ministered to, and it really it's one of those things where it just organically took off.
Really?
Yeah. So we have what we do is it's called an LMS, a learning management system. So most of our team, we have about 25 technical support people. We promote or we market to people in education about improving their education. We offer a master's degree, postgraduate, baccalaureate in spiritual counseling, and we offer it for free. So somebody with a bachelor's in Latin America can take a 2-year course, get a post-baccalaureate, a master's degree in spiritual counseling, and they get paid more money, they get faster promotion, and they're more qualified to take care of children. So it works out great.
So the outcome today, as it is right now, was not is far larger than your original vision of just impacting a more local community through the church there.
Well, you know what? But God, you know how it starts off. The Lord had talked to me about this a verse in the Bible talking about, I think it's in Isaiah, that the nations are just a drop in the bucket for the Lord.
Hmm.
And I felt like I had a vision but I didn't know how to deploy it. All I knew was the church model I grew up in. So I didn't know how to deploy it. And then, guys that were smarter than me, had more experience than I did, they just kept plowing into what they called the local church. And I read some books, and I'm thinking, I got hold of some business books. After maybe 1,000 religious books, and the business books were talking about leverage and cash flows and all. None of the spiritual guys were talking about that.
Right.
And then I just put business principles, like Jesus said when he was 12 years old, I must be about my Father's business. I put business principles to the gospel, and that's why we're able to scale so large with such a small crew.
Well, and the parable of the talents reaffirms that truth. Pastor, I'm going to take a little detour before I turn back to what you're doing. But you mentioned that you love church, but it doesn't seem to be the right model. I'm gonna share with you some things I've been preaching for 5 years, and I'd like to get your comment on it. And I call it caged Christianity. that, and I made a video with a lion behind me on the green screen, and the lion was roaring and shit. And I said, "Look at that fearsome animal. Look at its teeth. Listen to the roar. It was pawing up dirt." And Rocky, I said that I have no fear of a lion, provided that it's in a cage. Now, is it true that we have erected by the tens of thousands, even more, across this land and in fact across the world, cages that on Sunday morning we as Christians let ourselves into that cage and close the door behind us? And what happens in that cage is a good thing, Rocky. It is. Just like that lion, if it needs water in that cage, it gets water. If it needs food, all its needs are met. But there is no fear, in my opinion. Satan does not tremble that we attend church, as long as we stay in that cage. I preached this for, 5 or 6 years, long time. And about 6 weeks ago, it dawned on me that the reason we fear the lion when we see it in the cage is we know that if it got out of the cage, it would act the exact same way. Christians, well, not so much. So I think that part of what drives us here at PJNET.TV is we want to unleash the lion from the cage and project outward instead of inward. Because you mentioned that the church model, although it has merit, and I support it, we're focused inward, and there's not enough happening focused outward. Give me your thoughts.
Well, it's kind of a delicate subject, but if we're just going to call it kind of like an umpire, and you look at the billions of dollars the church spends, it just doesn't, I'll just tell you from my personal experience, I saw bad business decisions justified because they were spiritual. And I had a hard time with it. I'm thinking, man, people are donating money to me, and I need to make every penny count for the kingdom of God. To me, that means souls and discipleship for people to go get more souls. And so we had to change the model. But I love church now. You got to be careful.
I get it, Rocky. Because I'm not speaking out against a church. I'm speaking out against a church culture that's inwardly focused.
If the 100% of budget I had over the last 30 years could not have built one average cost church in the United States. I couldn't have built one building for 20 million people. This isn't 20 aggregate. This is 20. I can put my finger on 21 million people are receiving ministry every day at some level from chaplains in these school systems. It's just real simple, Coach. Look, I saw people rent auditoriums at churches that were empty, and they worked really hard to fill them up. I'm thinking they started off with people in them. Why don't we just minister to the people already at school? Why are y'all making this so hard?
Good point. Good point, Rocky. Hey, listen, we're running out of time. You have mentioned some overseas operations that sounded kind of, dangerous to me. Have you been in some trouble?
I got in a lot. You know what? When I was a kid, man, I thought you had to die a martyr to go to heaven, because when I was a kid, my grandmother's history book, her ninth grade history book, was different than my ninth grade history book. They had changed history, and that completely threw me off. I was this passive little kid, so I didn't nothing. It was like passive aggressiveness. I'm thinking, if they changed the history book, I don't know they didn't change the Bible. So somehow in my head, I summarized, if you actually died for the gospel, you'd have a pretty good shot at heaven. I just imagined it. Nobody told me that. And so I was a merchant marine officer, as a captain on a ship. I was in deep southern Mexico, and I saw some bad stuff happen, and I got highly engaged, and I had an opportunity to prove out my faith. People that were with me were hung. It was serious business. And I was trying to do good, but I was doing it. I was sincerely wrong. I was doing it the wrong way, and the Lord God had mercy on me.
You've lived a dangerous life. Let's end up on something a little bit, maybe it's lighter, but behind me is that's not a book cover, folks. That is a movie poster. And that movie is Pirate School. Rocky, tell us about your involvement in Pirate School and what that is.
That's a documentary about my life and the ministry. And it's the story of me being sentenced to life in prison in Mexico, and miraculously, I mean, a miracle of God, I was released. And then later, I was in the Nicaraguan Civil War. Met a beautiful supermodel. She became my wife. She was a nurse, and it's the story, and actually won the best Christian documentary in New York last year.
How long has that been out?
It's it came out during COVID, so it was kind of weird how it.
Yeah.
We had originally set it to go to theaters, and then we had to cut it back from a feature length film to a much smaller version, 26 minutes or something, 23 minutes, and the production side of it got cut back. So it just tells the story. We were going to go on location and all that stuff, but anyway. So it still tells the story without maybe as much drama or whatever. And but it's a way for people to maybe, get to know who I am and where I come from.
Well, I always thought it was a goal to have a book written about you, but to have a movie made about you, I guess, it supersedes that in many ways. Well, folks, we always run out of time. If you want to find out more, you can go to the website that's on the screen, the National School Chaplain Association.org. Give us a quick tour of that website, Rocky, to wrap it up.
That website has three premises. One is how to become a school chaplain. So it'll take you right through the process. It's very easy. And we have a board that will recognize your previous experience or no experience and recommend training that you would need to be certified as a school chaplain. Second thing it does is it educates schools of how to hire a chaplain, what to look for, and the standardization that we provide if they choose to hire chaplains that we've trained. The third pillar is advocacy, how to advocate for a chaplain in your school. Any school in the United States can hire a chaplain if they want to. It is not a legal issue. If you hire a chaplain and you are challenged, we have legal services that will defend you at no cost. So do not allow yourselves to be intimidated by the mirage that it's illegal. It is not illegal. It's a choice. Do you choose to have spiritual care for your teachers and students, safer school campuses, higher retention of teachers, and less suicide, less pregnancies, less violence? If you want that, it's available.
And you won't lose your federal funding.
No.
Okay, because it doesn't have to be illegal, but if you pull the plug on the federal money, especially here in the South, the schools would collapse economically. They don't have the property tax values. Ad valorem taxes have no effect. But Rocky, an interesting story. And there, folks, I want to put a little bit of a teaser. There is subject matter that we have intentionally avoided tonight. And we are eager to share more about it, but that will have to be probably in a couple of weeks or so. But I just wanted to put that teaser out there because there is much more to the ministry at the National School Chaplain Association, headed up by... Now, Rocky, are you the founder of that?
I'm the founder and CEO.
I just had a feeling that was the case. Well, Rocky, as the founder and CEO of a very effective and busy ministry, I'm just glad that you had time to share with us tonight. And hopefully we'll be sharing more in the future. But thank you for your ministry and your dedication and your service. And God bless you, sir. I think God has got some great things ahead in your ministry and for the kingdom at large.
Thank you, sir. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to tell my story.
Thank you so much. That was Rocky Malloy here on PJNET.TV, where our mission is to provide a platform for everyday Christians to share their walk with Christ. Although I must say, Rocky does not impress me as an everyday Christian. He is sort of he's sort of the Rocky, the champion of it. Well, folks, that will wrap it up for us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. I hope you'll come join us. And between now and then, I would like you to contemplate a couple of questions. Just ask yourself these two questions. It's pretty simple. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done in the kingdom of Christ? You ever been arrested? Ever had your friends hung? As in the case of Rocky? Well, maybe not. But whatever your answer to the first question is, consider the second question. How long ago was that? And the challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.